Something snapped the moment the cameras caught Jude Bellingham covering his mouth. It lasted seconds in England's goalless draw with Ghana at the 2026 World Cup, but those seconds detonated across the tournament. This was not just another heated exchange and another bad-tempered match. This was a moment that exposed a contradiction so glaring that nations are now asking whether FIFA's rules apply equally to everyone at all. That is why this story matters far beyond one argument or one scoreless game. We are talking about the biggest tournament on earth, a rule FIFA presented as strict and immediate, and a decision that millions believe became flexible the instant a global superstar from a powerful European team stood at the center of it. Stay with us, because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why Ghana erupted, why supporters across Africa saw something bigger than an incident, and why the silence that followed may prove more explosive than the gesture itself. And if you want coverage that goes past the headlines and into the pressure points others avoid, subscribe now, because what comes next is where the real story begins. Here is the central contradiction. FIFA told the world that covering the mouth during a confrontational situation would be treated seriously, even punished immediately, because it can conceal abuse, threats, or language officials cannot assess in real time. The message was clear. The rule was clear. The warning was clear. Yet when Bellingham appeared to do exactly that while speaking to Ghana captain Jordan Ayew during a visibly heated moment, the consequence was not a booking, not a review-driven dismissal, not even a public explanation. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No consequence. A rule announced with force, a camera angle that seemed to show the exact prohibited gesture, a match already simmering with tension, and still, nothing. On the pitch, the frustration had been building for nearly 90 minutes. England, expected by many to control the contest, found Ghana organized, physical, and fearless. Every loose ball felt contested like territory. Every whistle carried weight. Every stare lingered a little too long. Jordan Ayew, leading Ghana with the kind of defiance that feeds underdogs, was constantly in the middle of the emotional storm, pressing referees, rallying teammates, and refusing to let England settle into comfort. Bellingham, one of England's most influential figures and one of the most watched young stars in world football, was equally charged, equally animated, equally unwilling to step back. Then came the exchange. Cameras caught Bellingham bringing his hand to his mouth while speaking toward Ayew in what appeared to be a confrontational moment. Not a casual laugh, not a quiet tactical whisper between teammates. A confrontation. That distinction is everything. Under FIFA's own stricter interpretation, context matters, and the context here was combustible. Ghana's players saw it instantly. Everyone understood why this image was dangerous. Because this tournament had set a precedent. Earlier, Paraguay's Miguel Almiron was sent off for a similar mouth-covering gesture, a punishment that sent shockwaves through players and coaches everywhere. The signal from FIFA seemed unmistakable. Hide your words during a flashpoint, and you risk walking. That earlier decision changed behavior overnight. Players adjusted. Coaches warned their squads. Pundits said a line had been drawn. And then, against Ghana, that line suddenly looked erasable. That is where anger turned into accusation. Ghanaian players reportedly surrounded officials after the final whistle, demanding to know why the rule that had been enforced so harshly elsewhere appeared invisible now. Coach Carlos Queiroz, never a man afraid of confrontation when he senses injustice, fueled the fire with questions that struck at the heart of the controversy. If the law exists, when is it applied? If the standard is strict, why did it soften here? If another player can be dismissed earlier in the tournament for a similar act, why does Bellingham leave untouched after a confrontation seen around the world? Those questions spread with speed because they were not just Ghana's questions. They were the questions of fans who have watched international football long enough to recognize the pattern they fear most. One set of consequences for the powerful, another for everyone else. Across social media timelines, the same phrase kept surfacing again and again. Double standards, double standards, double standards. And yet this is where the story grows even more volatile. It was not only the gesture itself that enraged people. It was the surrounding belief that Bellingham's words may have included foul language during the exchange, intensifying demands for action. Proof of every syllable became secondary to the wider perception that the match officials and FIFA had no appetite to intervene once the face involved belonged to one of the tournament's marquee names. In controversies like this, perception becomes power. Perception becomes memory. Perception becomes the story that survives long after the final whistle fades. Before we go deeper, if this is the kind of reporting you have been looking for, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what this incident reveals about power, image, and selective enforcement goes far beyond one night in one stadium. Pull back further, and the picture grows darker. Ghana did not enter this match as just another opponent. For many supporters, Ghana represented something larger, a test case for whether so-called smaller or less protected football nations would truly receive equal treatment on the grandest stage. So when the Bellingham incident passed without punishment, outrage did not stay confined to one dressing room. Across West Africa, across the continent and beyond, the debate hardened into a broader indictment of FIFA's credibility. Why? Because football supporters do not judge institutions only by the rules they write. They judge them by the moments they choose to enforce. Anyone can publish a code. Anyone can speak the language of fairness from a podium. But fairness is not tested in the press release. Fairness is tested in the uncomfortable moment, the politically inconvenient moment, the moment when the player at the center is famous and commercially valuable. That is the real test. That is always the real test. And in the eyes of many, FIFA failed it. What makes this backlash especially potent is the symbolism of silence. Had officials immediately explained why Bellingham's action did not meet the threshold? Had footage been reviewed publicly? Had refereeing bodies offered a transparent defense? The fury might still have burned, but it would have met resistance. Instead, the vacuum invited the harshest possible interpretation. When institutions stay quiet during moments of visible inconsistency, people assume the silence is not uncertainty. They assume it is protection. Protection of whom? Protection of what? A star? A European heavyweight that FIFA would rather keep untouched than embarrass? Those are the questions now pulsing through this controversy, and they are not small questions. They strike at the deepest anxiety in global football, that equality is often advertised, rarely trusted, and inconsistently delivered. Here is where it changes completely. This is no longer only about Jude Bellingham. It is about whether rules are becoming performative tools, displayed for discipline when the target is convenient, then quietly holstered when the target is too important. It is about whether African teams are expected not only to beat elite opposition, but to survive suspicion, optics, and institutional imbalance at the same time. It is about the corrosive effect of one unresolved image repeated endlessly on millions of screens. A hand over the mouth, a captain face to face, a rule everyone knows, a punishment everyone remembers, and still, no action. Sit with that. Because once fans believe the game is being measured on unequal scales, every future decision becomes contaminated by doubt. Every whistle sounds different. Every review feels political. Every appeal looks pre-rejected. That is the hidden damage of nights like this. Not just outrage in the moment, but erosion of trust, layer by layer, match by match, tournament by tournament. So what remains after the noise? A draw on paper, a firestorm in reality. Ghana leaves with anger. England leaves with questions hovering above a star player. FIFA leaves with a credibility wound it cannot dismiss as online overreaction, because this controversy touched the most dangerous nerve in sport, the fear that justice depends on who you are. And now the world is watching for what happens next. Will there be a review, an explanation, a defense of the officials? Or will this be folded into the long archive of football moments everyone saw and nobody powerful wanted to answer for? That is the question hanging over this World Cup tonight. Not simply what happened between Bellingham and Ayew, but what the refusal to confront it is telling us about the system around them. Tell us what you think in the comments, because this debate is far from over. And if you believe football cannot survive selective justice, like this video, subscribe, and stay with us. Because when the rules bend for the powerful, the game itself begins to break.